Namaste. I am Rajni Aitar, Assistant Professor of Psychology. Now let's discuss about bilateral transfer of learning. We have experienced that learning of one skill often influences learning of another skill. The influence may be sometimes facilitating and sometimes hindering. If the learning of one skill facilitates learning of another skill, we call it positive transfer or transfer of training. For example, a man who has learned to drive a car can drive a similar car almost as well without additional practice. On the other hand, if learning of one skill interferes with or hinders the learning of another skill, we call it negative transfer or habit interference. Transfer takes place, that is positive transfer, within the same class. Example, learning maze, word list, poetry, etc. usually affects favorably the learning of other samples of the same kind of material. Bilateral transfer of learning or cross education is another form of positive transfer of learning in which learning is one part of the body facilitates learning in another part of the body. For example, learning to trace the star pattern in the right hand facilitates learning to trace the same pattern in the left hand. Another form of transfer is a transfer from one class to another. Here the transfer effects is very little. The findings in this field are of immense value for formal discipline. Transfer of training, whether it is motor or verbal learning, it takes place subjected to certain conditions such as similarity of contents, similarity of techniques, similarity of principles, and a combination of all these. The study in this line have a high application value in the field of education to develop educational pattern. Problem. To determine the effect of practice in the right hand of the performance in the left hand, or to demonstrate the phenomena of the bilateral transfer by before and after technique. Materials required for this experiment: mirror training board, battery, impulse counter, stylus, writing materials, and stop clock. Plan: give one trial to trace star pattern in the left hand, then 6 trials to the right hand, and again another trial to the left hand. Now compare the performance of the left hand before and after training to the right hand. Procedure: connect the mirror training board, battery, impulse counter, and stylus in such a way that the counter clicks and records the error whenever the stylus contacts the metallic plates of the star pattern. Fix the screen in such a way that the subject can be seen the star pattern in the mirror but not directly. First series. Left hand before training. Now seat the subject comfortably before the mirror tracing board. Keep the point of the stylus, which is in the left hand of the subject, at some point the star pattern. Confirm whether he sees the star pattern and the stylus on the groove of the star pattern, then instruct him thus. At the signal start tracing the pattern with stylus without touching the edges, that is without contacting the plate as fast as possible until you reach the starting point. With this instruction, give the signal start and start the stop clock. Note down the time taken and errors committed to trace the pattern in the left hand. Then give her 6 trials to trace the star pattern in the right hand. Again, note down the time taken and the errors committed in each trial. Second series, left hand after training. Following the same procedure, tell her to trace the pattern in the left hand again and note down the time and error committed. Precautions to be taken. First, the subject should not see the star pattern directly while tracing. The subject should avoid touching the edges of the groove to the extent possible. Work as rapidly as possible. Results. Compare the time taken in the left hand before and after practice or trials in the right hand. Compute index of learning in the right hand. Third, compute index of transfer of training of dividing the scores, that is time scores after training, by the scores of before training. Construct the table for the experiment. Serial number, subject, time used in each trial, that is practice taken in the right hand, 1 to 6 trials, and find out the index of learning. According to the literature available in the field, that practicing an activity with a particular part of the body usually facilitates performances of the same activity with another part of the body. This is technically known as a cross education. Usually, positive transfer effect is found between symmetrically located parts of the body from eye to eye, from hand to hand, and from foot to foot. If the cross education is from one body organ to its symmetrical counterpart, we call it as bilateral transfer. In the present experiment, the task is perceptual motor activity. It remains constant throughout, but the body parts with which it is performed varies. The results of cross education experiment shows positive transfer effects. The advantages or disadvantages resulting from transfer are confined to the early parts of after test. Gradually, the control group makes appropriate adjustment and catches up the experimental group which shows transfer effect at early.